So I want to give you a chance to just set the stage a little bit for our conversation. And the thing that seems most appropriate to me to set that stage is a comment that actually was just made by our previous keynote speaker, Katie McGrath, who ran into us just as she was leaving and commented on your position at the Carlyle Group by saying, like sort of an expletive, it is not easy to do what you're doing there. So I want to give you a chance to just talk a little bit about the Carlyle Group, about the role that they have created for you to step into, and use that as the launching pad.
Yeah, it was a moment, definitely. So the Carlyle Group is an alternative investment firm, which means that we are investing in companies around the globe, in real estate, in infrastructure projects. So it's a pretty broad set of investment opportunities that we work on. And it's a broad reach. The companies that we invest in employ over 1 million people around the world. And I'll tell you, when I first got the call about this role, I was happily living in the Bay Area, and the role is based in DC, and my response was, interesting, but no thank you. And I had my own biases about private equity going into this, but it was after, there were 3 things that really drove me to want to do this work and take this challenge on, and one was the fact that Carlyle had been working on these issues for a while. So I was stepping into a firm that already had shown some commitment towards driving inclusion and diversity. The second thing was pretty early on in the interview process, I said, before we go much further, I need to understand where the co-CEOs stand on this issue and what kind of partnership I can expect from them. And I met with them and was convinced, and I'm happy to say that I haven't been disappointed since I've been working with them. But the third thing that really pushed me over the edge and inspired me to move my family across country was the remit, the scope of the job that I have, because it includes both Carlyle itself, and that's powerful because it's influencing the investment teams that are investing in companies around the world. But the other key piece is I work on the diversity of the boards of our portfolio companies. And that is an incredibly powerful place or way to have impact. And so that's a little bit about us, but it's albeit the initial reaction that people often have, we're intentional and we're making progress on it. And I feel like I have partnership internally to do that, which is quite unique.
So I'd love to hear more about why that is the default reaction that often people have when they hear about private equity. I mean, you have an incredible insider's view now. What do you think it is that leads so many observers to note that it appears that these firms are lagging pretty badly when it comes to creating inclusive and diverse environments, right? So where do you think that comes from, and what can firms and the employees within those firms do to address it?
So I think the perception comes from reality. You look at the statistics for private equity globally, there's a recent benchmark that came out, 18% of employees are female, 10% at the senior level. So most firms do have a long way to go, and certainly Carlyle does as well. But we have 44% of our employee base overall is female. In the US, 25% of women at senior roles, or of our senior level roles are filled with women, and that's 21% globally. So the perception is real in many cases. I also think that part of what drives that is that this is an industry that's grown quickly over the last 25 years. So it's relatively young. And when industries and companies grow fast, people tend to rely on the network of people that they know when they need to fill positions. And so what you end up generating pretty quickly is a profile of people inside an organization that's pretty similar. And I think that happened in private equity. The other piece that compounds that is that this is very much an apprenticeship business. People come in very young and early in their career, and then they grow. And so that makes it harder for the demographics of the workforce to change quickly. We've put a lot of effort in the pipeline and developing that pipeline over the last 6 years. More than half of the junior class of investment professionals we've brought in have been diverse. Because, we have to start there, given the nature of the work.
Can you talk a little bit more about that pipeline development and what can be done to start changing things at those earlier stages?
Well, a lot of it comes down to making sure that you are setting people up for success, giving them some of the mentorship that they need. Carlyle has had, over the last 5 years, we've had 800 people participate in a mentorship program that's been put in place, and that's significant. That can change the trajectory for someone. The other piece is helping the people who are developing, the managers and leaders in the firm, understand what it is that they can do to more effectively develop that talent. We've rolled out an initiative that's called Better Decisions. It's about how do we understand the way bias can impact our behaviors and our actions and our decision making. And it is an initiative because it starts with raising people's awareness, giving them some of the insight and the tools that they need. But then it's about embedding reminders and changing the ways that we design our systems and our processes to help people behave as objectively and as they intend to behave. So a good example about developing people is our managers think really carefully when they're giving out assignments, particularly assignments that are career enhancing. They're thinking really carefully about who has the skills and expertise that could do that well, and they think consciously about tapping someone who maybe they haven't tapped for one of those career-enhancing assignments. So they'll do an opportunity inventory. What are the career-enhancing opportunities I'm going to have influence over in the next month? And then be intentional about who I give those to. Because otherwise, and it's pretty evidence in research that people from underrepresented groups tend to not get those career-enhancing opportunities as frequently. So we're helping people just be more intentional with those kinds of steps.
That's fantastic. And it makes me think about something that we often talk about at the school and something that I hope to see our students really grasping and making their own, which is the importance of being able to define yourself within the firm, define the trajectory that you want to be on, sort of help them get to know what you bring to the table, what you hope to be able to develop yourself into in the future, but also on the managerial side, to be humble enough to know that you need to discover that, right? That it's not all about kind of pinpointing, I know exactly what you're about, I know exactly what that hire is going to do for me, I've got them all kind of wrapped up in a bow, but I'm going to bring this person in because they've got enough of what we need for sure to kill it, but also I'm really interested to see what else? Like, what else can I hear from them? And give them the space to keep defining themselves and to keep kind of teaching the people in the organization what they can do with them. Yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that,
especially for any of us, to be thinking about what are those career-enhancing opportunities that you aspire to, and then let people know that you aspire to them. Because that way it's on their radar, and they're more likely to make that happen for you. I mean, a really simple example is there was a woman at Carlyle who came up to me and she said, I want to get more comfortable in public speaking. And I actually had a forum where I could bring someone and they could, have a short speaking part. And so I tapped her and she was thrilled. But, I would not have known to tap her if she hadn't said, hey, this is something that I really want to develop.
So that makes me think about your own career trajectory, because you've ended up a C-suite executive, a managing director, an incredibly successful pioneer in investment management. This is, as Katie mentioned, not easy to do. Did you have a sense of how to sort of navigate your way there all along? You know, if you think back to your MBA days, if you put yourself in the shoes of many of our audience members, did you have a sense, like, here's how I'm going to become a change maker?
My career has had so many surprises, and it has been far from linear. I laughed when Katie said she's had chapters. I've definitely had chapters, and ones that I wouldn't have been able to anticipate. You know, right out of my MBA, I went into strategy consulting like so many other people did. I had the amazing opportunity to work on a case that focused on organ donation of all things. But with some colleagues from the consulting firm, we ended up spinning off and creating a separate nonprofit consulting firm to pursue that work further. And what that ignited in me was the passion around working at the intersection of business and social impact. And if I think about two sort of through lines in my work, it's being drawn to opportunities to do that, to work at that intersection. And the other piece has been to be a builder, to build new initiatives. So I did that. I then went to Catalyst, which was an amazing opportunity, which introduced me to Barclay's Global Investors, where I was able to create the Office of Corporate Social Responsibility, which got me to BlackRock, which led me to starting the Science of Diversity and Inclusion Initiative, which then led me to Carlyle. So, you know, my brother likes to laugh. My sister used to be in the body parts business, but now she's a strategy consultant. You know, it's.
But I have to understand it at a finer level, because it has had so many twists and turns.
Yeah.
How do you keep moving up, sort of between these firms and between these roles in a way that feels fulfilling to you and that has taken you to positions of increasing responsibility and has more and more closely aligned what you do with that passion for social impact? I mean, it sounds like there have been these through lines, but did you know that at the beginning, and then that allowed you to kind of just pick and choose among these opportunities, or did you have to create them? Like, what has it been that enables you to keep moving forward in your career?
I think it's the passion around being drawn to an issue, a challenge that didn't let me stop thinking about it. So you have to listen to some of that magnetism of certain roles might have for you. So I knew, for example, going from the work that I'd been doing to Catalyst, I didn't know exactly what that was going to be.
And can you just tell people a little bit more about what you were doing at Catalyst?
So Catalyst is one of the preeminent research and advisory organizations that works to advance women in business. And Catalyst had long been in New York, and they decided they needed to open an office in the West, in the heart of Silicon Valley. And so I joined to open that office. An amazing experience, and at the time, I didn't have expertise in diversity and inclusion. I knew that it was an issue that I was drawn to and I was passionate about, but it had those two elements. It was working on an issue that had resonance for me at that intersection of social impact and business, and it was an opportunity to build something new. Catalyst is an amazing organization, has an amazing platform because they are very data-driven. They look very much at how can you change organizations to be better workplaces for women. And they also combine that with a pretty amazing set of companies and senior leaders who are around the table. And so, being attracted to those kinds of organizations that have the right elements in place, pretty critical. I think I've also always followed people that I thought were amazing leaders. having the opportunity to work for and be a part of that kind of a relationship is, as Katie said, don't waste your time with people who are not going to be good and champion and support you. And that's another important guiding principle.
Yeah, this is something, again, that I hope that our students are almost sick of hearing us say. But when we talk about career development and the importance of not getting too wrapped up in whether or not they like you, it's really easy when you're interviewing to be really focused on, what are they looking for, and am I showing up in the way that they're hoping I'm going to show up? But do you like them?
Yeah.
Are they delivering the kind of support, the kind of mentorship, as you were saying? Like, are they going to give you the work environment that you need in order to succeed, in order to be your best self, in order to discover all that you're capable of? I think in the best jobs, you don't know and they don't know the limit, the cap, the kind of the upper bound, if there is one, on what it is you can do with the organization. In those jobs, you know that you can get done what needs to get done, but you're both excited about co-creating opportunities and co-creating initiatives in those opportunities to help you both discover what's next.
And I think for me, intuitively, I've always looked at places where, one, I'm working for an organization that cares about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I think in the best possible world, you're at the heart of whatever that business is. I've also looked at places that have demonstrated that they are more inclusive and there is a runway for me, or someone like me. And at Carlyle, one of the things I'm excited about is, you mentioned we have over $200 billion in assets under management. Nearly half, so over 100 million of that, is led or co-led by women. So what that means is this is a firm that has demonstrated that we can put underrepresented professionals in the roles that are at the heart of our business. And those are the kinds of proof points that you want to look for when you're deciding where you're going to invest your time and your energy and your passion.
And why do you think it has become so important to Carlyle in the field that it's in to make those kinds of changes, to make those kinds of decisions?
I think it is a function of leadership, and leadership at a lot of levels. Certainly the founders of Carlyle, I think, thought differently. There's a spirit of working really hard. People are certainly smart, and they know they're smart, but they bring with that a certain element of humility to the process, and I think that's sort of perceived as one of the secrets to the success. I think the other thing is, early on, Sandra Horbach, who is one of those fund heads, she one, was an incredible role model for it. Two, she drove it. She said early on in the fund that she was responsible for, we are going to make sure that half of our incoming class of new associates is diverse. And so she demonstrated that you can make it happen and led the way in many instances.
Excellent. It's a really great note on allyship and what to look for everybody that's been told that you need to find allies, you need to create allies in your work, that looking for humility and their willingness to admit what they don't know and be excited about what you might be able to contribute to the conversation. That's a great way of thinking about it. I want to ask you to think about the environment inside of Carlyle, inside the firms that you've been in, and you talked about mentorship and making sure that the pipeline development carries through.
Yeah.
I want you to tell us a little bit more about what you're doing inside Carlyle to make maybe people here want to work there. What is it that makes you excited and proud to be part of that organization in terms of advancing inclusion and diversity?
I think one of the things that I am excited about that I touched on earlier. So first of all, you need to have the support, the commitment of leadership. Without that, you're rolling a rock up a hill, and it's very slow progress. And so I'm excited about that, because that is clearly visible and in words and in action with our leadership team. I think that the other thing is that they're taking a hard look. We look at our metrics. We're covering that information as part of quarterly business reviews. So we're being very intentional about it. I think the other piece I'm excited about is that this is resonating with who we are and what our role is as a firm. One of the things, we're making investment decisions. That's what we do. So we pride ourselves. We need to have the best judgment and make the best decisions. And there is a recognition that in order to do that, you can't have all of the same set of experiences and backgrounds and approaches around the table. So there's a link to this effort around inclusion and diversity and honing our edge. But I think the other thing is that we now have an appetite that people have to say, what can I do differently? How can I adopt some behaviors in my day-to-day that will change the experience? I mentioned the thing about assignments, but we've been going through and helping people to understand, regardless of your level, what are the steps, simple steps, like even how you introduce someone, how that can change the way they are received in the rest of a meeting. We're also changing some of our systems, decision-making systems, and the ways we have those systems and processes unfold. Katie talked about that's really what will lead to sustainable change. And I'm excited that we're doing that. I'll give you a great example. With our promotion committees this last year, we redesigned how those committees function. We gave them certain tools. One of the simple things we did was acknowledgement as one of their goals was to be as objective as possible in that discussion, and that they gave each other permission to question if they thought bias might be entering into a conversation. And then we gave people some information about how bias can show up when you're evaluating performance, and what words you might hear that might be indicators that might be happening, and more importantly, what you could do, what you could say if you suspected that, in a way that was productive, so the conversation became much more fact-based and objective. Now, it's not just a result of the intervention, because there's a lot of work that's gone into it, but 33% of our promotions to partner this year were women. So I think it's beginning to create the structures so people can behave as I believe most people want and intend to behave.
Yeah. And how are people within the firm keeping themselves accountable as you try these new interventions, as you introduce these new strategies? Presumably there are going to be a lot of people for whom this is a question mark. Is this really going to work? Is this actually necessary? Is this going to be better than what we had before? How do you help them to reflect on the positive effects or the negative effects of what it is they're doing, and then keep moving forward, somehow keep trying to do better in whatever way is available to them?
Well, the first step is making it okay for people, just setting the stage that this is new for a lot of us. And we're not always going to be elegant, and we're going to make mistakes, and there has to be a certain spirit of generosity that we're working towards getting better at this. And we're going to make mistakes, and that's all okay. I think the other piece is helping people to have a place to start. Because sometimes people, their reticence isn't so much that they don't want to do it, but they're afraid and they don't know how to start. And so giving them some of those concrete action steps makes a big difference. I mean, I'll tell you, the other piece for me sometimes is making sure that I'm not prejudging somebody and how they're going to respond to this. You know, I have found myself wonderfully surprised by people who I thought would not be receptive and wanting to take action on this. And they've completely blown my bias around that. And at the other end of the spectrum, I've had people who I thought were going to be completely bought in, and they're not as willing to take the action steps.
Yeah, I think we've had a number of conversations actually with different women just today about the ways in which inaction is often interpreted as resistance, or as, you know, it's sort of they're not doing anything, so of course they don't want to be doing anything. And I think sometimes that leads us to preemptively not even try, not even reach out and build that bridge. And so it's great that you're finding that you can get over that. But I do have to ask about the extent to which you found that there are actual opponents that have been in your way. Like, what do you do when there are actual skeptics, people who say, no, I don't believe it, I don't like it? They're in that field. Well, I guess the question is, do you find that there are people who are harder to move in that way, and what do you do in those situations?
So I would say in more and more cases, I am encountering people who are more saying, I want to do this right, and I want help to do that right. And so I'm going to go there first, because I want to create as many allies and advocates for this as I can. You know, with people that are resistant to it, it depends on how central they are to making the change. You have to keep the big picture in mind. One of the things that I do find with a lot of people, though, is if you can find a way to link this to something that's important to them about their own identity. And so it doesn't have to be because they care about inclusion and equity. It can be that you have someone who prides themselves in running really efficient organizations. And you show them that perhaps they're not being as efficient in taking advantage of the talent inside their organization. So that might be the hook for them. So it doesn't have to be what's the hook for me, but it's really understanding what is going to inspire them and align with who they see themselves as being.
Yeah. One of the things I love about the work that we have done together and the work that you're doing is that, you know, you often work in really close alignment with research, and both of the things you just mentioned pick up on threads of things that we've seen in the evidence. The first part, I think, is often overlooked, the importance of creating that surround of allies, not just because you might one day try to mobilize those allies to go make the pitch with you or for you, but also because there's this great evidence on kind of region-level change in inclusion and diversity, such that any individual person becomes more likely to support inclusion, to support more diverse workforces, to the extent that they happen to be basically living, working kind of in a community of people who are having positive experiences with inclusion and diversity. It's just sort of, the more it's conceivable because I'm exposed to other people's positive experiences, the more likely I am to want to advance that. And so
Absolutely.
That and that I'll use that to sort of introduce the audience to some of the most amazing work that I'm familiar with in your career, which is the work that comes out of the private sector and reaches across to the academic world in a way that I think is fantastic, with the Science of Diversity Initiative that you co-founded, which brings academics and practitioners, top leaders like yourself, together to do real research and real organizations to try to figure out what works, what's the state of the workplace. Can you tell us more about that organization and what you hope it will achieve?
Yeah, so the origins of it was when I was at BlackRock, I began working with some behavioral economists to help understand this whole question of what are the ways in which we can apply some of the concepts of behavioral science and behavioral economics to changing inclusion and diversity in organizations. And we did some work together that had some pretty powerful impacts. And what was exciting is it wasn't asking people to change, but again, it was changing the systems and in ways that are scalable. And so we walked away from that work and said, we need more of this. And as someone who's been trying to drive change, I felt the need for new tools and new approaches. And so we ended up creating the Science of Diversity and Inclusion Initiative to do that, to make sure, first of all, what behavioral science knows gets in the hands of people like me and other leaders who are trying to drive change on this. But to your point, also to create new insight and to create new tools and approaches. And it has led to some pretty exciting insight. Things like the messaging you use to invite people to apply can have a huge impact on the percentage of women and people of color who apply for roles. That showing managers in an organization at key moments, their historical pattern of decision-making around hiring and promotion can have a big impact on their decisions going forward. That things like having people self-rate in a performance evaluation actually can amplify bias. So get rid of those. I mean, it's things that we are all used to doing as the normal course of action in our business lives, but how can we think about and structure them differently to help us get to where we want to go in terms of inclusive workplaces?
Can you give us an example of the most sort of surprising, most exciting thing that you feel like you've discovered doing that work?
Oh my goodness. So I will point to a piece of research that you and I both know the woman who led this, who was phenomenal. And this is a piece of research that has helped me to frame the work that I do and how people think about that work a little bit differently. But her name was Kathy Phillips, and she did research that showed that diverse teams are more accurate, far more accurate than homogeneous teams. But that when you survey the members of those teams, and they feel less effective, and they're less confident in their decision. So you have this paradox, right? It's where what feels right can actually lead you astray. And it turns out it's that tension, that difference within diverse groups that actually leads to the greater innovation and the greater accuracy. And so what's been profound for me in that research is the ability to use that to help people reframe how they experience that tension and that discomfort that can be real in diverse groups. It's not just discomfort because it's discomfort's sake. It's discomfort because it's actually leading you to think harder, prepare more, listen better. And that ultimately gets you to a better decision. So people then all of a sudden can experience that through a different lens, a lens of it's helping me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, because as you know, unfortunately, Kathy passed away recently.
Yeah.
So I think it's especially important to me to underscore the importance of that work, because you often hear, as you heard earlier today, that in some sense, the kind of changes that you want to see in the world in terms of making the workplace more diverse, more inclusive, they aren't hard. These things should be happening. We've got lots of data to suggest that that diversity can be enormously helpful in organizations. Sometimes it feels like it should just be this kind of very easy flip, and that the thing that should flip people is the promise that it's going to be better. We have lots of reasons to think it's going to be better. And I think it's important to emphasize for people, it's going to be later, that in between, when you're making the change, it will probably not feel good. I think we just have to own that there will be discomfort, but that it's not even just that we should just tolerate it. That discomfort is what tells us we're doing the right thing. We're doing the actual thing. We're not just papering over and the differences between us. We're actually engaging with those differences. That's why it's so uncomfortable. So all that kind of checking of my assumptions, all of that kind of introducing new out-of-the-box thinking and questioning the status quo, that is the thing that is the source of the benefits of diversity. The discomfort is a signal that we're doing that. Like, yay, it should be this wonderful celebrated thing. And it's amazing to hear that it's being celebrated. And I think in large part because of the leadership that you've shown inside of an industry that's not known for being the most open and agile to that sort of thing. So
Yes.
thank you for doing that work. Before we go, I just want to ask if you have any parting words for our audience, especially the ones who are sort of aspiring to build a career in investment management, but really just more broadly than that.
Yeah, I was reflecting on Kathy's comment that she wasn't optimistic that in 10 years we're going to make change. And I appreciate the challenge and what leads to that comment. I think I'm more optimistic. I'm more optimistic because I see that there is more openness and more interest in understanding what we can do on the part of people that I would not have anticipated 5 years ago. So I think that's really exciting. I also think that we are learning more and more about what that actually means to put this into practice individually and as organizations. And so I think right now is actually a great time to be launching careers, certainly careers in investment management, but select well in terms of where you decide to invest your rare and precious time and energy.
It's wonderful. Thank you again for joining us.